Welcome to the Catholic Midlife podcast, where we address the challenges and the opportunities of midlife from a uniquely Catholic perspective. This is the time, my friends, for a deeper renewal of your Christian vocation. Come and enter into the freedom of Christ that allows you to be the person you were created to be, because there's an amazing, awesome, exciting next season of life waiting for you. Hello and welcome to the Catholic Midlife podcast. I'm Karen Herbert. I'm here with my spouse, Curtis.
Hello, everyone.
And we have a super exciting episode for you today. It's one of our rare interviews, and we are so excited to have a special guest with us, and I'll let Curtis introduce him.
Well, it's my pleasure to welcome Bill Yo to the show. Bill is the chairman and the co-owner of one of the largest family-owned businesses in the United States. He's a man, he's held multiple CEO, C-level positions there. The company, there's something like 40,000 employees. Bill's not so involved in the day-to-day, but he's very much involved in his ownership and leadership role. And you would expect somebody like this to spend his time flying around to board meetings and hanging out at Martha's Vineyard. And I don't know if you visit there or not, but you have something else on your mind. It is, and that's what we're going to talk about today. And my friends, if you've wanted to have more joy, more love, more purpose in your life, Bill has something for you, and it's probably not what you think it might be. So Bill, hey, welcome to the show.
Wow. Thank you, Curtis and Karen. It's my honor to be here, and I hope I can live up to just a little bit of that introduction. So,
yeah, I was thinking if I were one of your employees, I'd probably be oh yeah, we're going to have this Zoom with Bill. I wonder, did I do something wrong? Something I said? Let's be on my mind. But you've written a book, Bill. It's called Unvarnished Faith, Learning to Love with a Servant's Heart. I mean, what the heck happened to you to write a book like that?
Yeah. At the time I didn't have the word to say it, but the Holy Spirit thumped me on the heart one morning and said, you're going to write a book about this mission trip that you're on. So I kind of woke up on the third day of this week-long trip and told one of the other, chaperones at breakfast, said, boy, my subconscious had this thing going on. And it wasn't until a lot later I realized, no, buddy, that wasn't subconscious. That was God rattling around inside of you saying, you've got half a trip left to do a whole bunch of research and you should end up writing a book about this experience. So it was a pretty moving process. And several years later, out came the book at the beginning of this calendar year.
Yeah. And that was a trip you were roped into.
More or less. Yeah. I'm the youngest of five. So, I have four siblings that, have no problem trying to boss me around and things. But my next oldest brother, Jeff, and his wife, Suzanne, started a food ministry, a Christian food ministry a number of years ago called Servants with the Heart. And you mentioned our subtitle of the book, Learning to Love with a Servant's Heart. So they pack bulk meals that are shipped to underserved communities all over the country and all around the world. And a lot of their food goes to Nicaragua, and they have an affiliation with an in-country ministry down there. And every year, among other trips, they send a bunch of high schoolers down for a week in January, and some chaperones go down. And so he had invited me several years to go as a chaperone, and I really wanted no part of it. It was this austere environment, very underdeveloped part of the world, doing all this God talk. It was just not something for me. But Jeff's persistence paid off, and one year, several years ago, he asked me, and I found myself saying yes. And before I knew it, I was on a plane to Nicaragua. So.
And there you were. So learning to love. What's a memory you have of that trip?
Oh gosh, Curtis, so many incredible memories. One incredible one, and it really led to the title of the book, Unvarnished Faith, was one of the places we went to distribute food was a trash dump. Literally, people in Nicaragua, there are people that live in trash dumps because part of their livelihood is they can forage through the trash, and if they can extract enough recyclable or other monetizable materials, they can bring in some modest level of income. So on our first day, they took us to a trash dump, and literally there's trash on fire. We're in these rugged shoes, but stepping over medical waste and everything you can imagine. And we met a woman there. And, this woman was, I'm going to guess, maybe late 20s. We saw a couple of her children running around, and we saw this elderly gentleman who she said was her father. The head of our mission was translating this for us. And so we spent a few hours on site. We distributed some food. We walked around. It was just like nothing you could ever prepare yourself for. And so through the translator, we asked this woman, how does it feel? Like, how do you feel to be here? And, the things that were coming to mind were just hopeless, sad, despaired, like we just, unfathomable things. And she answered the question with, yo estoy contenta, meaning I am happy. And it was a knock us over with a feather moment. Happy. How could she possibly say she was happy? So the translator, asked the follow-up, can you please tell us, of all the words you picked that you would use contenta as how you're feeling? And she said, well, I'll tell you why I'm happy, because I woke up this morning, I didn't know how I was going to feed my children. And I prayed to God, and God sent you today with food. So if you ask how I'm feeling today, I'm happy. Her name was Maria. And it was just this example of this stripped down, what I've come to call unvarnished faith at work, where she was lacking. She handed it off and put it at God's feet, and God answered her prayer. And it wasn't dressed up in any rote prayers. It wasn't part of any sacrament or big, doctrinal kind of evolution or anything like that. It was just need, pray, receive, gratitude. And it was just one of the most beautiful, dignifying, as I said, unvarnished kind of faith things in the world to have that experience. And then the quick postscript on that was that evening back at our compound, we broke the high schoolers into small groups and would debrief each day, kind of what happened and everything else.
Sure.
And of course, my group was still blown away by this experience of Maria saying she was happy. And so these are all, kids from Charlotte, North Carolina, middle class, upper middle class kind of upbringing, a very comfortable, developed world. And one of them said, gosh, that's amazing that woman said she was happy with what she has. Imagine how she'd feel if she had everything we have. And without missing a beat, another kid said, oh, she wouldn't be happy. And it was kind of one of those mic drop moments, like, okay, our work here is done. These kids are getting the message about, what really matters in life, and how the material trappings are trappings for a reason, but how that quickly, these young people could realize, what true happiness, or in this case, true joy, really is about.
Man, I'm just so humbled to hear that story. And I think how so much of my own life is driven by fear and lack of trust and impatience and needs.
Yes.
And I need a lot of stuff, honey.
Well, the capacity of that woman, Maria, to step into happiness in that moment and just rejoice in how God was providing for her. That is a beautiful story.
Yeah. No, and it's one that has and will continue to stick with me for the rest of my life. So
in your book, you talk about the Christian faith, as a contact sport. Why do you say that?
The idea of Christianity being a contact sport, it's for me, faith and Christian faith and fundamentally about love and fundamentally about relationships. And the model of Jesus Christ is all about being in relationship with each other, with others, and being in contact with each other. Being a partner with others, engaged in their lives, often in very meaningful, emotionally intimate and spiritually intimate ways. And that to me is all about being in contact with others. And it can be physical contact, emotional contact, spiritual contact, you name it. But just how you can support others and know that if your faith only exists in your mind and quietly in your heart, that's not who we're meant to be. We're meant to discern our talents and gifts and deploy them to help other people and be the arms and legs and the eyes and ears and the heart of God. And so that to me comes down to this whole idea of it being a contact sport. And football was one of the sports I played growing up. So the analogy totally works for me.
Bill, we really like to encourage people in this midlife season to reconnect with what you mentioned, which is their strengths and their talents, and moving into a season where God really wants to use them in very special and particular ways. I guess I'm just wondering, have you seen that in action? What are your thoughts around really digging in and finding those special, unique things God has created us with in order to serve and to really invest in the kingdom?
Thanks for asking that, Karen. And these middle chapters of life, something that has really occupied a lot of my energies lately. We were, I believe, all created not only in the image of God, but created as part of God's plan, with each with our own unique talents and gifts. We were imbued with these talents and gifts. We've been encouraged to develop those talents and gifts, to recognize them. And to me, I talk about it as a toggle, and the toggle is between revelation and discernment. So God reveals, I discern. God reveals, I discern. So what are those moments in life where God is revealing to me what my talents and gifts are? And some things can be from a young age, some things can come up more recently, whatever the case may be. And then it's incumbent on me as a believer and a follower to discern, what is it that I've been uniquely imbued with, and how do I have ways to impart and share those talents and gifts with others, and particularly with the less fortunate. To me, that's ultimately what the gospel message is about. And what we're called to do is to discern what we're uniquely good at and then use those things to help other people. And so I've had the opportunity to spend a lot of time, and the privilege to spend a lot of time discerning on those things and figuring out, for me, whether it's writing and communications, whether it's leadership, whether it's business strategy, whatever the case may be, whether it's cooking, whatever the case may be, how can I deploy those talents and gifts to help other people, to bring joy to other people. And whether it's, like I said, as small as a Sunday meal or something as large as chairing the board of a not-for-profit that has a mission that really speaks to me and makes an impact on the community. And it's something I really encourage a lot of people to do. And it brings up this concept of ministry. You all with your show, this is ministry. You all are in ministry with what you do. And I know outside of the show, you both have things where you are in ministry. And ministry is a scary word for a lot of people. Most of us will never minister from a pulpit or from a pew, but all of us, I believe, are ministers. If you have discerned your talents and gifts and you're deploying to help others, that's ministry. And it doesn't mean just doing the soup kitchen and delivering the turkeys on Thanksgiving. If we can all look at what we do with the majority of our time and energy in our day, professionally, personally, family-wise, volunteer-wise, as our way of deploying our talents and gifts, then we're in ministry, which is what we're called to do.
Bill, in your book, I was struck in your chapter on talents, how a lot of the talents you listed weren't exceptional. It was almost like, well, how can you make your own unique contribution? Well, you're the one that shows up to help, or you're the one that accompanies somebody. And it was very encouraging, actually, to know that, I don't have to be the CEO of something to have talent.
No. And anybody who has had the chance to do anything resembling mission work or helping somebody who has a want or is lacking, will know. And one of the things we were taught on these missions was, of course, if you give somebody who's hungry a meal, you are serving them. That's kind of, you are physically nourishing them. But one of the things I really like about Servants with the Heart and my brother Jeff and his wife Suzanne's ministry is, yes, they are about distributing the food, but they're also about relationship. And they recognize the beauty and the nourishment spiritually and emotionally that can come from investing in somebody's dignity and recognizing their dignity. With the mission to Nicaragua, whether it was with an elderly woman or a young child or a single parent, whatever the case might be, if I have a chance, even just for a few minutes, to be in relationship with somebody, even with the language barrier, my Spanish is functional at best, but even with the language barrier, just to have that eye contact or maybe a touch on the shoulder or a hug, or in many cases, sharing a tear with somebody, that's a form of nourishment. And that's a gift. That may not be, you said, that's not a CEO talent, but that's a gift that we can share with each other, is the gift of our time and the gift of our personhood. And one of the things a priest taught me during I got a master's in ministry and theology during the pandemic, and a priest taught me that the key to ministry is to recognizing the love within yourself and the love within the person to whom you're ministering, and to connect that love with each other, because that's where God exists. And that put words on a process or a function or a relationship in the missions that I didn't have at the time, but I think it really holds true.
So love includes connecting as one of your themes, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Love and relationship, they go hand in hand with each other.
I remember this was a number of years ago, but I was reading a theological treatise on love by Joseph Pieper, and he really drove this exact point home that you're talking about. And I think he was quoting Aquinas, but the sense was, there's no such thing as love that's not in a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
You can't love somebody you're not in relationship with, because there's something essential about love that must take place in that context. And I just felt like that was such a beautiful image for me. I've held on to it for a long time.
Spot on. Love is an action for sure. Yeah.
So Bill, you were a Christian and you were on this mission trip and you said God thumped you, the Holy Spirit thumped you. I mean, what happened to you, man? Like this, you're just on fire. Like, can you explain or describe it?
Actually, Curtis, I have to go back before the trip. So back in 2015, so, 8 years ago now, my mom passed away, and, she passed away after a relatively long illness and sort of a roller coaster of health. And the moment of her passing, it was in June of that summer. It was very sad, of course. Anybody who has had the inevitable, heartbreak of losing a parent, it was sad and losing her, but it was also very beautiful. And I don't use the word beautiful lightly. It was beautiful. It was physically beautiful. It was late afternoon, and this brilliant red sunset was streaming through this huge sliding glass door near her bed, and was beautiful because she was surrounded by loved ones. We were holding her arm, holding her hand, holding different things. And it was beautiful because we knew the moment that her pain ended and that she went to be with God. And for me in particular, what made it even more beautiful but impactful, this thumping that you just mentioned, is that in that moment, God literally thumped me in the chest. I felt a push on my chest as my mom passed. And again, I didn't have the words at the time, but afterwards, in hindsight, recognized that was God telling me, I'm changing your direction. You need to do doing more. You need to be doing different. And so a couple months after that, I talking with my wife and a number of other people, decided I was going to pull out of a lot of my management duties at our company and do something different. A couple months after that, started attending a small group. A couple months after that, put this professional change in place and decided I was going to research and write a book on our father, and by extension on our family and on our business. So, that was, about the next 18 months or so, I undertook that task. And when I went on the mission trip, it was literally the week after that, my father's book had appeared on Amazon. And so this was all very fresh in my mind. And, again, with the benefit of hindsight, I can say that's why God said, hey, you think you just completed that. I'm actually going to have you start that over again. So you have 3 more days in country in Nicaragua, go back into research mode, do your interviews, take your pictures, fire your journal up again, do all those kinds of things, because you don't know when you'll be back. And I'm calling you to write a book on this. And so I did that for the rest of the trip. And there was a whole bunch of follow-up, and then the pandemic and some academic things. So eventually I got around to publishing the book, but the book came out in January. God bless, went to #1 bestseller on Amazon. And now it's brought me to you great people here. So
it's a little curious to me. If I were thinking of, man, okay, I got to come up with a list of virtues that I need every Christian to know so they can go be excited, they can be empowered in their faith. And you came up with a list of 6. And these are character, dignity, talents, serenity, failure, and gratitude. And I just found that to be a curious collection. What accounts for that?
When I hear it read back to me, it sounds super curious too. But it was one of those things where I just discerned over time, how am I going to organize this book? What's it going to look like? And the first thought was, well, the trip was 6 days long. So why don't I think about like a 6-part book? Each day or each part of the book, I can talk about, whatever happened on that given day. But then right around then, I reread the book Tuesdays with Morrie by Mitch Albom. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's a book that came out in the 90s. And on one level, it's a story about a man's weekly visits to his dying college professor. But on another level, it's a story about their conversations about life and death and everything in between. And so I kind of became intrigued in that model and started thinking about, well, if I want to write about this whole idea of faith and love and relationships, well, what are for me the things that undergird that feed that enable one to really open themselves up to love and be willing to dive into relationship? And just, again, this toggle of revelation, discernment, character kind of popped up. And then the whole idea of everyone having dignity popped up. We talked about talents being part of it. Serenity, again, sort of borrowing from the Serenity Prayer and Alcoholics Anonymous, the whole idea about being comfortable with what I can't control was something that I really needed to work on. I'm still working on those things. There's a lot in there. And then, failure kept coming up for me. And I kept thinking, boy, we just, as a society, particularly in the developed world and, America, the privileged part, certainly, we underplay the importance of failure. We explain it away. We helicopter and snowplow parent our kids so that they don't fail. And we miss a lot of opportunities to learn in failure, and God shows up in failure and hardship. And then, gratitude for me is something that I've been blessed to come across a number of different people who really understand not just the spiritual and emotional benefits of gratitude, but the physiological and neurological benefits of gratitude in ways, neuroplasticity and all these things that were just foreign to me. But the more you learn about it, the more you recognize, that stuff really matters. And I didn't set out to have 6 virtues to fit the 6 days, but, I think I can say that was kind of God's plan for me to come out that way. And each of the 6 has really, withstood the test of time, if you will. So we even built chapter guides at the end of each of the 6 parts for small groups and book clubs and to follow and stuff. And we go through those things, and each one of them still works for me. I wouldn't swap any of them out. I don't know they add another one, at least in this chapter of my life. So
this is a fun book for small groups. There's some questions in the end. It's very readable. There's so many stories. It's moving. I like that. I think it's great for people that are thinking about going on a mission trip or trying to fire up the crew, because it speaks to things that come up. I love your list. It's in this ancient tradition of, Augustine and the church fathers and Thomas Aquinas of describing virtues in ways that look how exciting your life can be. Do these things. You can bring joy and beauty and faith and power of the Holy Spirit into your life if you will live into these things. And that's such a beautiful way of teaching the virtues instead of, a dumb list of stuff you better do.
Or else.
Right. Or else. Yes. Yeah. There's always that form of faith, which is coming from that, in the academic world, we'd say that's the hermeneutics of suspicion, where we're taking a negative understanding and interpretation of knowledge as opposed to one of charity or appreciation, where we're taking a more positive bent on it. So.
Well, one thing that's striking me is, being a person who I'm not sure if I'll ever be able to go on a mission trip. Full disclosure here, I have not yet been able to read your book as Curtis has, and I'm truly inspired to, as a way of entering into the experience, even though I myself am not personally there.
Well, and Karen, what I'd say, and maybe you haven't taken a week and boarded a plane and flown 2,000 miles, but I am totally convinced, I've just met you, that you have done mission work throughout your life and ministry throughout your life. And one of the things that's really popped out to me this year in particular with the book being out is how we don't have to take a week and fly a couple thousand miles to do these kind of things. You can go to virtually any zip code, if not your own, an adjacent zip code, and minister and walk with and be in relationship with people who are lacking. Sadly, I live outside of literally the poorest large city in the country, Philadelphia. And, there are some really, really tough, struggling part of the city, but there are some great ministries and great Catholic ministries and missions that take people down there. And I've had the chance to literally have lunch at my home, go down there and be, in some pretty unimaginable places for a few hours and be back at my house for dinner. And so it doesn't take all that commitment about going overseas to really do mission work. And I'm sure that kind of mission you're familiar with. So
that is a great point, Bill. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I think for the second time in my life, I've been kind to an Eagles fan.
Uh-oh. Yeah. Particularly here as we're a week away from the season starting. So
we won't tell anybody.
Okay.
Oh, heavens. Hey, here's just a question. What does being comfortable in your own skin, what has that got to do with the Christian life?
Boy, yeah, no, thanks for asking that. And that, that comes under the virtue of serenity that we talked about a few minutes ago. And for me, what I came to realize, and leading up to this culmination of when my mom passed and, God pushed me, was I had become sort of somebody where I always feel like it's good when you're with somebody, if you know things about them, to sort of behave or act or talk in a way that they might feel more related to. It's almost a little bit of a chameleon kind of thing. But I found I got, and that was sort of in my early to mid 40s. I got more to a place where I was thinking so much about, okay, who do Karen and Curtis expect me to be right now? Let me be that person. And that was almost maybe independent of who my core personhood really should be, who I was created to be, who God created me to be. And so this whole idea of it being comfortable in my own skin It ties to this idea of serenity and what I can't control. It ties to the idea of being present, not being overly hung up on the past, not being overly, consumed with the future. And so the more I can focus on trying to be comfortable in my own skin, be comfortable with who I am right now, internally and through my faith life and my spiritual strength, as opposed to being too randomly or whimsically swayed by what's going on around me or what's happening or being said to me, the stronger I can build that internal fortitude, the better person I'm going to show up for others. It doesn't always mean everything's going to roll off my back, but what it means to me is that I'm going to show up more consistently for others. Like that they'll know, okay, if this happens, Bill's going to react in this positive way. Oh boy, if this happens, Dad's not going to be happy, but we know how he's not going to be. There's a consistency to that when you're comfortable in your own skin. And I'm still trying to become more and more predictable for others, because who wants to be with somebody who's not predictable? And so the more time I focus on it, talk about it, and even have conversations like this with folks, and just be more aware of the strength I get from God, the more I let that really drive me, the more comfortable I can become in my own skin.
Wow, Karen, that's a really powerful way to connect authenticity with integrity. That was very appreciate that explanation, Bill. Bill, from your book, this idea of Catholicism and what that's all about and what that might mean to us, that's really important to you. Can you explain this?
Sure. Thanks for that, Curtis. And so I'm a relatively late convert to the Roman Catholic faith. I was born and raised Episcopalian, so in a mainline Protestant tradition. And sort of as I tell people, I was a lifelong Episcopalian who recently converted to Catholicism and published a book about an evangelical mission trip. So kind of spanning the gamut of the Christian faith, if you will. But what I like to talk about with Catholicism is that I'm both equally proud to be an uppercase C Roman Catholic Christian and a lowercase c universal Catholic Christian. Within the original meaning of the word Catholic, lowercase is universal. And in our creed, we talk about, Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. So from an uppercase C Roman Catholic Christian, I feel very committed to and closest to God in the Catholic tradition. And I came to that, late in life, in my late 40s. My wife and children have all been, cradle Catholics, and we were married by her uncle, who was an Augustinian priest. But I never felt called to it. And a series of things happened where all of a sudden Catholicism caught on fire for me, and Mass just became an incredibly, intimate, personal, spiritual experience for me where it never had been. And just the whole size and institution of the church is something with all of our granted shortcomings, like any large institution has. All these things really drew me to the faith in a way that uppercase C Catholicism is part of it. But I also, doing the mission trip, Unvarnished Faith, meeting Maria, having a chance to study not just the breadth of the Christian tradition, but other faith traditions, other Abrahamic traditions, Eastern traditions, really understand there are a lot of universal tenets of faith out there, universal Catholic tenets of faith, how we should be treating other people, that, we should understand our place. We should understand our connection to a higher power. We should understand the call to discern our talents and gifts. I've had the chance to interact with a number of Muslim church leaders or Muslim mosque leaders and faith leaders, and they use different language and different terms, but the concepts are right there. So these aren't even necessarily just Christian ideals. So I like that idea of both the strong depth of my Roman Catholic faith, but the strong breadth of my lowercase c universal Catholic faith.
Yeah. So whatever it is we're going to do, let's at least get the big things right.
And Lord knows, with all the division in society and the different challenges that we have out there, and now we're entering into another national election cycle, and at times get the chance to talk with faith communities about division and about how people of faith can help lead us through and fight against some of these societal, these fabrics sort of woven in dynamics that breed division, and they prey on these relatively minor differences we all have, as opposed to the vast indwelling and common personhood we have, having all been created in the image of God. And how people of faith, and principally through dialogue, and through recognizing that we're all created with dignity, and that we all are created equal in the eyes of God, that these are all things that are uniters, not dividers. And so how can people of faith in that lowercase c, even those who may dwell in an uppercase C Catholic dwelling, how can we sort of put that lowercase c hat on, if you will, and reach across these divides?
Bill, awesome. So I've got the book. Where can I get the T-shirt, or what resources can you direct me to?
We got to work on the clothing line, I guess. So unvarnishedfaith.com is where you can find all things having to do with unvarnished faith, and some of my other writings and poetry and other things we have out there. And we also have a newsletter where every week or so we send out different things. Like we'll have the opportunity to send this episode out, which will be great, and some different excerpts from the book. It's a nice community with a whole bunch of people in it. And love to have any of your listeners who are interested follow up and reach out. And I'd love to be in dialogue with any of them as well.
Well, I'll be joining your list. That's for sure.
Awesome. Thanks, Karen.
Yeah, fabulous, Bill. Thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate you.
Thank you both, and God bless.
Thanks for being here with us. The Catholic Midlife Podcast is for anyone that wants to receive the abundance of life that God has for each one of us. Take a moment right now to tell a friend about us.